Welcome to the AI in Education podcast. Ray, where are you today and what have you been doing?
Dan, have you got auto-tune? It sounds very musical now, the last couple of episodes as you introduce. I am in Sydney, of course, middle of the winter. Yesterday I did a workshop with an insurance company, with the leadership team of a major insurance company. You wouldn't be surprised that the focus of it was about AI. You wouldn't be at all surprised to find that we did spend quite a bit of time talking about responsible and ethical AI use and also irresponsible AI use. I've taken to use my case studies of AI as irresponsible AI. Next week, I'm hosting the TAFE New South Wales. They've got a day of AI strategy for their leadership team. I'm hosting that. I think we're going to have about 300 people involved in that. So that's going to be pretty exciting. I'm going to be talking about the use of AI in industry because I've got a bunch of case studies that we're going to talk about and how to help people find case studies. If you're a teacher in an area, how do you find what's going on? Maybe next episode we can talk about the toolkit that we created as part of an FSO project that's free for everybody to access. So busy times, Dan. How about you?
That's amazing. Yeah, I obviously listened to the AI in Education podcast episode last week with Amanda Rose, which is brilliant, actually. Listening back to that is fantastic. It was really good to remember. Sometimes you do interviews on the pod and they might be like a month ago, and it's nice to listen back to them. And Amanda was brilliant talking about all the small to medium-sized business stuff and women in AI. It was amazing. But myself, I've been working with a bank this week. I did some stuff with one of the banks in Australia and New Zealand randomly, but because of their learning area as well. So it was a big bank talking about AI and strategy and agentic AI and things. But the interesting part for me was that I was talking to the HR and learning people as well. So they were talking through things around what environments might they be doing, what are learning people, the people from our pod, I suppose, people like BCE and Lee at C Chat, explain to them how education is pushing the boundaries and what they could be doing as a
Yes.
corporate organization with a learning arm to drive outcomes for their own internal learning. So I talked about that, and next week I'm going to Seattle to have a download from the mothership. So all going on here.
Fantastic. It's fascinating when you're talking to learning and development people in businesses because the one anchor that they've got, let's call it a concrete block around their legs, is exactly the same as education, which is the LMS. Like, oh yeah, well, the learning is delivered through the LMS. It's like, but we can
Yeah.
do podcasts and we can do all these fantastic coaching conversations. Only if it comes in a SCORM package.
Yeah, you're right. Because that was one thing I showed them. One of the things we're doing a lot more in Microsoft, which would be useful for our listeners as well, is we're doing a lot more agent conversational AI plays in
Yes.
our like learning content. So for example, I was doing one recently and it was about security. So the persona I was speaking to was a security person, and I had to talk to them about what was on their mind with security, what their top of mind is generally around budgets and things, and understand what their priorities are. So it was a really interesting interactive environment, I suppose, to help me think more about conversations around things, just the content. So we got news this week, though. Lots going on.
Well, do you know what, Dan? I've been very cautious about thinking about technology news. Like, there's been a heap
Mm.
of AI things that have happened over the last 2 weeks that are ready for this episode. And each of them I've looked at and thought, is that just a little bit too geeky, a little bit too technical? Do we not understand the implications of it? So I have not brought along a whole series of technology headlines. I have instead brought along some stuff that is about AI specifically in education and has got some big implications. So let's
Yeah.
jump into that. But I think we should just do a little bit of technology stuff. Dan, we should probably say we record this the day before we publish it so I can edit it and get it out. But last week we jumped on a quick call because of the new voice mode that they released in ChatGPT.
Yes, and I remember I had a message from you in the morning saying, Dan, have you got 10 minutes just to record something? I'm like, yeah, okay. And this is brilliant, actually. It's really, really fun.
Okay, let's go back to that then. Hey, Dan, I've noticed there was an announcement last week about ChatGPT and the new voice mode, and it kind of feels much
Yes.
more intuitive. But hey, you remember I've said a few times, AI is like the smartest and the dumbest colleague you've got at exactly the same time.
Yeah.
I was playing with it this morning, and my goodness, got a great demonstration of that. I don't know. Have you got an AI buddy there? You can stick it into voice mode and
Yes. Let
ask
me
it,
do that.
Dan. Ask it how many
Hold on.
E's in 17.
How many E's are in 17, Copilot?
One big E right there in 17, and a little bit of a mind bender, huh? Anything else you want to puzzle over together?
Are you sure 1E? Can you check again?
You got me. There's actually a pair of them hiding in 17. Slipped right by me. Good catch.
A
Keep
pair?
me on my...
Oh, I've got to ask, Copilot. How many E's in 7?
In 7, we've got 0 E's. It's a total E-free zone, so a letter E took a little vacation there.
Okay,
Anything
just
else
spell
you're
it for
curious
me.
about? All right, spelling it out. Seven. Just the one E in there. Anything else on your mind?
How many E's are in teen, Copilot?
Teen is a double E fan carb. It's got 2 of them just hanging out in the middle. Got any more words you want to test?
And 7?
7 is back to that single E, just one in the middle. It's a bit of a spelling roller coaster today.
So 17 has got how many E's in it then?
17 is gobbling down on the E's. It's got 2 of them, one near the start and one near the end. Anything else on your mind?
So,
A lot.
Dan, this is just absolutely classic, isn't it? Because it's that same problem of, you can't rely on it. It seems to be right most of the time, and then suddenly it does a wild one. Hey, let's give a ChatGPT voice mode a try. Hey, how many E's in 17?
3.
3?
S-E, yeah, let me count it out. Seventeen. That's 4. I missed one at first, sorry.
Okay, so it's either 3 or 4. Which one are you going to pump for?
4. Definitely 4.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay, can I show you one that I mentioned in the podcast the other day? Let's see if it works now, right? This is about not trying to pause and just count to 100, but it always interrupts itself. Let's give it a go. Hi, Copilot. Can you count up to 100 but not interrupt at all? Just count to 100 for me.
Absolutely. I'll kick things off and take it all the way to 100 for you. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and on we go.
No, don't on we go. Just straight from 1 to 100, please.
Got it. Straight shot from 1 to 100, no extras. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's do this.
No. That kills me. It's very funny.
It's funny, Dan. It's a reminder. You always have to check what it's doing, because it's both like it's not even a first grader, is it? Because a first grader with enough concentration could count to 100. It's like it's both a first grader and a PhD student at exactly the same time, and you never know which one's going to turn up into your conversation.
It's Schrodinger's cat all over again.
Brilliant. That, Dan, is why we recorded it last week, because it was all over the socials, and I'm thinking they're going to fix it. Quick, record it before they fix it. But I've had inconsistent results. I tried it yesterday, and I was getting 4 in chat, but in voice mode I was getting 3, because it's using a dumber model. You don't get the same high quality models when you're talking to it in voice mode as you do when you're typing stuff into it. So
more of a concern as well, though, is that with social media highlighting things that are happening in these models, then companies are going back and going, oh, I didn't know the particular model can't count up to 100 without stopping. We'll go over the top and embed that into the kind of Uber prompt or whatever it might be. So it's this tweaking that's going on is a little bit concerning, because yes, we can do those tweaks for like obvious fun things that are going viral on social, but then what about the millions of signals and things that are dropping through?
Wow, we're going back to my early days in the computer industry, where I learned about Japanese quality improvement processes. I learned specifically about Jiran quality improvement, which was you've got to go and fix the cause, not the symptom. So fixing the symptom is them going and saying, "Hey, ChatGPT 17 has got 4 E's in it." The cause is, well, what is the reason for that? Because you can bet that that's not the only problem it's got related to the similar cause. So yeah,
Really interesting.
it's interesting. But hey, we have these moments, and that's where I kind of think of AI as both the smartest and the dumbest colleague I've ever worked with. Smart because it can go and do well. Actually, my real worry with smart is I'm not smart enough to ask questions that it can deal with, because
Yeah.
if I've got a PhD level researcher in my pocket, do I have the skills to give them enough tasks at the right level? And then dumb, because it can literally count out the E's and spell it for you, and then when you say how many, get it
Yeah,
wrong.
there are frustrating things out there when you ask for things and you just get used to that. I'm sure everybody, all our listeners have got elements where you've asked it, please re-edit this document for me and keep the references to Frankenstein or whatever, and it kind of takes them out. And, there's lots of things like that happen. But when we're going into some of the other news here,
Yes.
this next piece of news that we've got was people are commenting a lot on social, because I know you shared it
Yeah.
on LinkedIn and socials, and I shared it on Twitter or X or whatever, and lots of people have got an opinion on this. So this one's called "A Brown Professor Suspects Majority of His Class Used AI to Cheat,"
Okay, so
right?
the first thing to
That's
really
easy
make
for me to
clear,
say, right?
let me make this really clear. The Brown professor is a professor from Brown University, because I saw
Yeah,
somebody
yeah, yeah.
interpret that as well.
Very good point. Yeah, and this is an Inside Higher Ed article
Yeah.
that was going viral on socials, right?
Okay,
So
so
what's
this
under the covers here?
so this is an economics professor. This professor gave his students two different tests. Halfway through the term, he gave them a midterm exam
Yeah.
for them to take home and do and hand in. And you wouldn't believe this, Dan. The class average was 96% for this test, which is way
Okay.
more than he'd ever had before.
Yeah.
Now, being a smart professor, you might suspect a little bit of cheating. So one of the things he did was he gave the paper to ChatGPT, and surprise, surprise, similar-ish kind of answers to the ones he was getting from students that he knew weren't at 96% level. And a bunch of students got 100% on this exam. So at the end of the year, they then do a final exam. And that final exam is in-person, supervised. So that's a proctored exam.
Yeah.
You're never going to guess what happened, Dan.
Whoa, I wonder what happened, right? Did
So
their
first
results go
off,
down by any chance?
when he announced the final exam was an in-person supervised exam, 18 students dropped out of the class. So a quarter of the class dropped out straight away.
Wow.
The class score went from 96% in the midterms to exactly half, 48% in the final exam.
Mm.
Okay, now the chart that is on the article is worth going to look at, because you see for every single student their midterm exam, unsupervised, and their end of year exam. And basically you can see what's going on. Of 59 students in the class, remember, Dan, 96% was the average mark for the midterm. In the
Yes.
final exam, only 4 scored 80% or above.
Mm.
Even
Yeah.
though 57 out of 59, so like 96%, scored above 80 in the midterms.
It's fascinating to see the ones who got 100%, and then they've got like some have left, obviously, but then there's 21% and like
Yeah.
50%. Really interesting.
So what we can tell is 90%, maybe 95% used AI to do their midterm. Now, there is no proof of that, but my gosh, the data tells you that's the case. There are only 4 students that vaguely got close to the same mark in their final as the midterms. There were 2 that stood out. One student got 95 in both exams, the midterm and the final. So there's an amazing student. But the other one was they got 59 in the midterms and 55 in the finals. Now, in the midterms, that means they were almost bottom of the class. But the answer is they were not using AI.
Point.
I
Yeah.
reckon those 2 students are the ones that deserve the awards, because One is the highest performing student, still the highest performing, but the other is the student who was trying to learn and doing the midterms themselves rather than handing it over.
Yeah, or they didn't read the instructions properly and realized they could use AI. I remember I went into a maths exam in university and I turned up and it was an open book one, so it meant we could take our books and everything in, and I just went in with a pen and a calculator, and I'm like, oh no.
Everyone
Yeah,
else would have thought, my
so
God, he knows his stuff. Okay, so this,
yeah, and then oh, I know I'm going to tell you another one as well. I know you want to move on there, but I also did an English exam for my GCSEs back in the UK, and I remember spending ages writing. I was like, "God, this is a long paper," and then right at the very end, it said you can you had to answer section A or B rather than A and B, and I filled the entire lot in. So I was like, "Geez, this is a long exam."
so
Anyway,
you passed your writing exams and failed all of your reading exams, Dan. So this situation, this is a bit like, do you remember jug cheating in cycling? When
yeah,
there was that argument,
yeah,
well, everyone else is doing it, I've got to do it. It feels like that. If every student
yeah.
is just using AI to complete their assignments, how does it feel to be the student that isn't using it? Because
Mm.
you're going to be penalized even though you're the only one not cheating. But also, it's a massive warning for students. If you use AI to glide through your course and you're learning nothing, then you're going to end up like those two students in this example where they got 100% in the midterms and 0 in the finals.
Yeah, and dropping out, which is even worse. So
Yeah.
like that's quite an important flag for universities who care about attrition as well.
Yeah, I also looked at this from an employer lens as well, which is it's a really clear demonstration that if you give somebody AI, they can achieve more. So as an employer point of view, it's like, let's give my employees more
Oh yeah,
AI to
true.
work
Yeah,
with.
interesting.
It's all part of that bigger conversation around that gap between how do you use AI to help learning, not hinder it, and how do you use AI for students to be ready for the next stage of education or employment. So if you haven't seen that, do go and look at the data because the chart is pretty compelling. It might be something you share with your students to go, hey, don't be this class. Do not allow AI to let you switch your brain off because you're going to do terribly when you come to your finals.
Exactly. Now, the next piece of news research we've got here is the Digital Educational Council for AI in Higher Education. They did a global survey recently.
Okay, so the Digital Education Council, it's an organization in Singapore that's a members organization with a bunch of universities in it. And they do a series of briefings, surveys. I actually would say if you're in a university, if your university is a member of DEC, go to their website, get access because you can read the reports and the surveys. They run webinars, it's great. But they also publish some of their surveys externally. The benefit of being a member is you get benchmarking against other universities. But there's a lot of data in it, loads of great stuff, but a lot of it we've talked about before, that what proportion of students are using it, etc., is all kind of pretty standard. It's in the 80s and 90s across all the reports. But here's two things I thought were interesting. The first is 43% of students say they have not experienced any AI integration into their courses.
Yeah.
42% say they've seen it across a few of their courses. And only 15% say that it's across many of their courses and subjects. So that's this year's data, students saying the majority of their courses are still ignoring AI.
But I suppose university courses do take a long time for the quality assurance and things to get through as well. So, to redesign a course and redesign assessments of key modules would be quite tricky. But yeah, it's interesting.
Dan, while I agree with you, and I understand that it is really tricky, and I understand that changing stuff is difficult, if you're a third or fourth year law student, you're just about to graduate into an environment that is heavily AI driven.
Yeah.
And the majority may not have touched AI during their course.
It's a fair argument. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So look, I'm not criticizing, and I understand that it's difficult, and there's system problems as well, but there's a bit of a reality check as well that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was interesting in this report is they asked students about how they felt about what AI might do to their future job opportunities. The question they asked is, they asked the student to agree with, I worry that AI will reduce job opportunities in my field by the time I graduate. So, a couple of interesting things here. The first is humanities and social sciences were worried. Business and economics, they were worried. At the other end of the scale, education students, health science students were low down the worry list. And I agree with that. The surprise one was law was quite low, which I find interesting because we've had all this discussion about the impact on entry-level careers in law. So that's
Yes, yeah,
one way of
definitely.
looking at it. The other, they looked across continents. So they looked at Asia, Europe, and the US. And Europe is a lot less stressed about this than either North America or Asia. And I think that's interesting because I don't know. It's is it that Europe isn't aware of what's happening? Or is it that students in Europe feel that there's the regulation they're talking about in AI is
Yeah.
also going to help defend their jobs?
Yeah, and I'd probably go with the latter. That it's sort of speculation, but when you look into the news and things, and the fact that the US and Canada are having a lot of pushback on big tech and data centers, and there's a big thing happening there at the minute in universities as well. So that entire system, and the fact that the European Union has done some positive regulation around AI, maybe it's that, but who knows?
Okay. Now,
Now, the next article, can we
hmm,
go on to the next article, or is there something
yeah,
else
no,
there?
let's do that.
Yeah.
And
So I
let
think the next article might trigger people. Myself and yourself, Ray, we've done a lot of online training for online abuse materials and things through the exploitation agencies, Australian Federal Police, Think when we were working at Microsoft. So, just a trigger warning because the next article is actually quite poignant.
yeah. So for 2 minutes, we're going to talk about this issue around AI assisted online sexual abuse. If you want to just whiz forward 2 minutes, that's great. But I think it is important that we talk about it, and it's important that we don't leave it till the end of the podcast. So this is an ABC News story, and it is a survey that's of 2,000 Australians between the ages of 16 and 18. And what it found was 1 in 25 had experienced or had a friend who had experienced AI assisted online child sexual victimization. So that could be an undressing app. It could be somebody taking your face and putting it on somebody else's body. All kinds of things like that. But shocking, isn't it? 1 in 25
Yeah.
young people had experienced it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and there's a lot to unpack in here. Like Lee Barrett, one of our guests, she put a nice opinion piece together on LinkedIn around this, which was very, very interesting.
Yeah, and the thing that she highlighted is the other stat that jumped out at me, which is the victims are more likely to disclose that victimization to AI than they are to a person. So you're more likely, if you're having a problem, and I think this extends beyond just this example, it extends into bullying and other things, you are more likely to go and have a chat with your AI buddy than you are to go and have a chat with somebody in authority that's going to do something. So the takeaway for this is thinking about, as a teacher in a school, for example, your students, if they're getting into some difficulty,
Yes.
feel more open talking to an AI about it. I think I've talked about this a few times. I think you have as well. There are bits
Mhm.
where I would ask AI for feedback that I wouldn't ask a human. This is a
Yeah.
different scenario, but it's just that comfort thing that young people have in their relationship with AI is different to the one that we might have as adults, and just an
Yes.
awareness thing.
And awareness as well around boys specifically, because there's a big thing at the minute about boys, and there's a lot of research about boys and things that are happening with young males in society. And I think it's worth reading out Lee's point here verbatim. She said, "But the finding I just can't move past is the help-seeking one. It isn't really a finding about AI, is it? It's a finding about us. Our boys are choosing the listener that won't flinch, won't panic, and won't judge. I am doing some massive introspection as a result. So, as a parent, that landed really hard with me as well, because as a parent, you always judge, you kind of try not to, but being able to talk directly to an AI and then them not judging and understanding what you're saying, it's got pros and cons again. There's lots of people being encouraged to do things they shouldn't using AI, but yeah, very, very powerful piece.
So it's the double-edged sword of AI, isn't it? It's that dual purpose technology. It can be both great and it can be terrible at the same time. Okay,
Yeah.
let's move on. So, Dan, there's been a report out from the Department of Education and Workplace Relations in Australia about AI and employment in Australia. There's a lot of detail in it, but two key points from the executive summary that I think say it all. I'm going to read out from the report. The first is, there is no evidence to date of broad labour market upheaval driven by artificial intelligence in Australia. Overall, labour market conditions remain strong by historical standards, youth outcomes have mostly held up, and occupational reshuffling has not accelerated. Okay. Then they say, however, occupations more exposed to potential automation by generative AI have grown more slowly than other occupations. Between November 22 and February 26, employment in the most exposed fifth of occupations grew by 6% compared to 10% in the least exposed fifth. So basically what they're saying is, we can find no compelling evidence that AI is at this moment creating an upheaval or fundamentally changing the workplace. The one thing they did find was that jobs in potentially AI exposed areas grew a bit more slowly than jobs in other areas. But they didn't find no entry level jobs. They didn't find jobs disappearing for youth. They didn't find jobs being automated across all of the categories. So I think it's really interesting because what you might think and what is showing up today are two different things.
Yes. And there was a nice table here as well, wasn't there? One of the least exposed jobs, because I think people really want to know about that. And then the most exposed jobs. Anything jump out to you?
So look, most exposed jobs, clerks, developers, accountants, checkout operators. Least exposed jobs, child carers, age carers, teachers, which I agree with, because by heck, Dan, we shouldn't be replacing teachers with AI. But I did have a problem with one of them, the truck drivers category. So truck drivers and forklift drivers. I'm not sure. I think that the next wave of self-driving vehicles is going to be trucks. Now, maybe in Australia,
Oh, yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah.
maybe in Australia it's going to be a long time, but we've got self-driving cars doing hundreds of thousands of trips every single day in North America. So when the floodgates get unlocked, those roles are going to change. So I love the overall general stuff. That bit about forecasting bits of automation, generally I think it's okay, but there are a couple of things that you could potentially argue with. Like,
Yeah.
is taxi drivers safe for the next 20 years? Probably not.
And there's one thing as well, in middle exposure was education aids. So there's such a plethora of different roles who could land in there. You've got some people like Dawn, who we had on the podcast, who was specific education aid for special education needs. But then you might have got people going in to support with reading or literacy, which is where it might be exposed. So the devil's in the detail here. But at least it's another good thing to pick up, talk to the kids about, talk to, them about with careers and things. Really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's table 1 in the report. Just pop that
Yep.
up on your whiteboard in the classroom and have a chat with your students and see what they think about it.
Definitely.
I know that in one of the other research surveys we talked about a little while ago, 16% of students had changed their main degree as a result of thinking about how AI might influence. So, yeah. Okay, Dan, that was all the news. But, Dan, research. There's been more research.
Yeah, let me read the first one out. AI in university assessment, evaluating the opportunities and risks of automated marking.
Okay, so what they did was
Right.
they compared 3 leading AI models against human markers. They got 760 real psychology essays from 3 UK universities. And then they said to AI, can you mark this, please? And the prompt literally was, you are an experienced name of the university examiner, so like Cambridge examiner, marking psychology degree, an undergraduate assignment. That was it. So
Right.
they just said to
Okay.
it, India from Cambridge,
Yeah.
mark this down. So here's what they found out. AI tended to reward essays that were longer, ones that used more varied vocabulary, and ones that had more complex sentences.
Hmm.
And now, that wasn't in the marking rubric, but it tended to reward that. But look, there's a really important limitation in this. Dan, you would know this because you were involved in this kind of stuff. Two humans marking a paper are not going to agree most of the time.
Absolutely not. No, and just for people who might not know this, you'd moderate. First of all, go and people tell you this is what we're looking for in the marking about this particular thing. This is the mark scheme. These are the answers. And then even with the answers and everything, and you know what's going on, it's different with maths because maths is pretty accurate to a certain extent. But all the other subjects, you then got subjectivity when you're reading a piece of work, you're looking for key phrases. And even then, when you mark, that goes to somebody else, like a chief moderator, to moderate your moderated work, and then you raises your marks up or down. So yeah, it's so difficult.
And so the difficulty here is they didn't measure what's the difference between AI and a few humans. They measured what's the difference between AI and one human, and we know that that one human may not be right.
Yeah.
Because you might get a more experienced marker come along and give a different mark. Yeah, they acknowledge that weakness, and they said there's more significant marking between the universities. And they don't know whether that difference is in AI or humans. Is it that Nottingham and Cambridge mark exams quite differently? But yeah, so look, I don't think this tells us what we would like it to tell us to. Can AI mark as well as humans? We don't know. What we do know is it marks differently to a human.
Yeah, so I see what you mean. It's nearly there, but
Yeah.
it needs to be it needs
So
a bit
good
more
news,
again.
the next paper that I brought along, I think is better. So this is called LLM Performance on a Real Double-Marked GCSE Benchmark. So
Right.
this, I think, is good. So 35,534 real student responses were in English, maths, biology, chemistry, and physics. And what they did was got 2 qualified examiners to mark each of those 32,000 questions. And then they got AI to mark it. So this is interesting. The strongest AI models agreed with human examiners either as closely as or more closely than the 2 examiners agreed with each other. Yeah? This is
Yeah.
pretty important, I think. This was true not only for subjects that we think of as objective like maths and science, but also for English essays.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
interestingly, they found that the more expensive models were not necessarily better than the cheaper models.
Okay.
So, hey,
Yeah.
what do you take out of this?
Did
Well,
they use
maybe.
Did they use different models then?
Yeah, they
So
tried it out with, God, this is geeky, Dan. They tried it out with GPT 5.5, GPT 5.4, and GPT 5.4 Milli. They tried it out with Google's Gemini 3.1 Pro, 3.5 Flash, and 3.1 Lite. Oh, and they tried it out with Claude Opus 4.8, Sonnet 4.6, and Haiku 4.5. And then they tried it out with an open source model from Google called Gemma 4.
yeah.
Hey,
Okay.
Dan, I didn't set you up for that question, but I happen to know the answer. So here's
Yeah,
the
it's
thing.
well, but that is interesting because at least it's good to see people change and experiment with the different models in the research now because we do know that research takes some time to come out, so that's quite new and good.
So the key conclusion, the best AI models achieved human level marking consistency. And
Yes.
in some subjects, they actually exceeded the agreement between 2 humans. I think this is important. It doesn't mean we should go and rush headlong into this, but this piece of evidence and the work behind it is so important as we start to think about which processes in education can we relieve from the teacher in order to give them more time for teaching and face time with students.
Yeah,
Although,
definitely. I'm been doing some projects on this myself, and we'll get the people on. We've spoken to the South Australia department before, and we'll get them on again because they've been doing something on this around LEAP, which is like a language testing basic testing of things they do in South Australia. So that'll be interesting to bring them on. It's not academic research, but they're doing that to save teachers time. So very, very interesting.
Okay, next paper. This paper is called Teaching with Gemini, Measuring the Impact of Guided Learning on Student Maths Progress in Sierra Leone. So, important thing to say here, this is some researchers from Google DeepMind, measuring the performance of a project that they did in Sierra Leone. So, bear that in mind. It doesn't necessarily mean any of the results have been changed, but I'm pretty sure that if it didn't work, they wouldn't have published the paper.
Yeah.
But what they did was they did a big randomized controlled trial, so a good standard to do that randomized trial across 1,700 secondary school students in Sierra Leone. Half of the maths class used Gemini's guided learning feature.
Yeah. And that feature, just going over that again, that was the Socratic guided learning agent that they did. Yeah.
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 They used it over 12 hours over 8 weeks. So
Yes.
the other group just carried on with normal teaching. Now, what they found was the students using Gemini got much better maths results, an increase of 0.26 standard deviations. If I remember my statistics at high school, that's a good number. And those that actually used it following the recommendation, so they're given a certain amount of time that they were recommended to use it, they achieved even larger gains.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Now, the students were really enthusiastic about using Gemini in the lessons, and often they were asking for more time with the technology. But the key is, this wasn't just AI having a chat with you. This was a Socratically, pedagogically sound set of instructions given to it so that it was supporting teaching and it was tutoring, not it was just writing your essays for you or whatever.
Yeah.
So the good news is AI can improve learning when teachers get actively involved in guiding how it's used, rather than simply, what we have today, which is in many situations, the teachers ignore it and the students just go home and say, hey, ChatGPT, help me with our homework.
Well, one secondary thing there as well, even though it's nothing to do with the research to a certain extent, is if you're using technology in a classroom and the kids are engaged, then there's also that, and this is where the problem with a random control trial comes in sometimes as well, is it increases engagement because kids will turn up and they'll go, oh, I'm in Mr. Fleming's class for maths, and I really want to come into that class because he's using AI stuff, and I attend the classes more, and therefore my results go up more as well. One of the things that I found when I did research in the UK on games-based learning for maths was that the attendance went up, and we could never correlate them using brain training games for their math ability, but the fact that they were in school and enjoying maths lessons meant that they were more engaged in lessons. But really, really good bit of research. So the next one, access is not enough. Human support improves engagement with AI tutoring.
Okay, Dan, this is important. This comes from the Stanford Scale Initiative, which is all around accelerating learning. And
right, okay.
Okay, so here's my one sentence summary of the whole paper. Build it and they may not come. So just because you've built a AI tutor doesn't mean students are going to use it. And they did 2 different random control trials in elementary schools, so primary schools. And they gave students dedicated time to use the AI, but only about half the students even used it once. And even when they added some human tutoring support on top of the AI support, the numbers only changed a little bit. So, saying that AI tutors make a difference to learning is only going to be true if the students use the AI tutor. And in these experiments, even with a bunch of guidance, the minority of students were using it. And I think this is really important because it hints to the changing role of the teacher as well. If a student is motivated to learn, the opportunities for them to learn are bigger now than ever existed in my day. Like, my opportunity to learn was either the textbook, the TV, or the Encyclopedia Britannica. Whereas now you're unlimited on what you can learn, but you've got to have the motivation to learn.
Yeah, very true.
And AI tutors don't necessarily provide any more of that motivation at the minute.
No, and we've talked about some of the nuances of that in the pod before, haven't we? And sometimes if you create your own AI, then whether people will go around that, or even if you're using enterprise AI and they think you're going to be looking at it, maybe I'll just use my own. So, yeah. A
Okay,
human
so the next
support.
paper is a bit of a blend between those last three. It's called the Generative AI Learning Penalty, Evidence from Chinese Secondary Schools. So they looked at 30 months of data from 26,000 students in China.
Wow.
And what they found was students who used AI to complete their homework got their homework done about 30% faster, and they got 18% higher scores in their homework. But when they got closed book exams, their exam
Yeah.
result
Yeah.
dropped back again.
Mm.
And what they were saying was when it came to the major entrance exams for the universities, their results were between 18 and 24% lower after 2 years. So, yes, you may appear to think you are learning something, but that learning loss may be accelerated. So first question is, are you learning something, or is AI learning it for you and regurgitating for you? And the second is, if you learn something through AI, does that stick in the same way as learning something through a teacher?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So they're all getting a theme here,
Yep.
aren't they? They're
Yeah.
really coming
And I
together
think
and
this is a
bringing a theme
great
together.
set of papers because each individually is telling us a thing. But when you put them together,
All
I think
together.
we're starting
Yeah.
to see a clear story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Right there. Now, the next three papers are about the relationship between the way people think about AI and its impact on their learning. So, it basically what we're going to do is build a case why learners need to be thoughtful about how they use AI. Don't just jump in with 2 feet. And the question it raises, what is the role of the teacher in this? How do
Yeah.
you get the message over to your students that it is really important to think about how you engage with AI?
So the first one it says it's called the agency gap: perceived human AI agency, reflection, and generative AI learning across the UK and China-based higher education contexts.
So this is researchers at the University of Bristol Business School and the University of Leicester in the UK, and then the Beijing University of Chemical Technology in China.
Ooh,
They
wow.
have great university names in China. They're quite specific.
Yeah, just a bit.
And what they did was that this was specifically about higher education. And instead of doing the, oh, is AI good or bad? What they did was look at whether students were still making the important decisions. So,
Right.
what I
Yeah,
mean
with
by
the
that is,
agency.
are students using it in a way where they are still keeping control?
Mm.
And what they found was that, well, first of all, they found some differences between the UK and China. So there were some differences about academic confidence that could be cultural rather than data. What they basically found was that the value of AI depends less on the technology and the AI system you're using and more about how students use it. So, as a student, what they found was it is so important that you continue to think independently. So, don't
Yeah.
switch your brain off and let AI do the work.
Yeah.
So, this is where the agency gap title came in. So, they describe it as you've got to close that agency gap. The humans need to stay responsible for judgment. While you might use AI to help you with idea generations or supporting of learning,
Yes.
you still need to be switched on all the time. It's just like cruise control in a car. When you switch it on, you can't switch your brain off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, true. And then that then correlates into the next one. So how do autonomy, critical thinking, and artificial intelligence value perception affect university student self-regulated learning? So this is students regulating their own learning now, their own agency again.
Yeah,
Um,
we're back into the world of long paper titles that maybe are
yes.
longer than the summary should be. So universities in China, Hong Kong, and Saudi Arabia did this research. They looked at 333 students, and
Mm,
what they were trying to do was to work out whether students' approach to their use of AI changed the way that they then learnt. So what they found was that students with a kind of more independence and more autonomy, with stronger critical thinking skills, and with opinions about AI, one way or the other, either it's good or it's bad or whatever, actually, it was a predictor of how successful they were going to be learning with AI. And the one factor that came out above all else is critical thinking. The stronger your critical thinking skills, the more likely you are to get a result using AI that is more positive than a student who
Yeah.
uses AI to learn but doesn't have that critical thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's about trusting, knowing when to trust it, when not to trust it. Don't
Yeah.
ask it to count
When
how
to
many years
question
in
it.
17.
Yeah.
And knowing when to question it.
Yeah.
Like, I did something the other day where I thought, I wonder if that's correct. And so I stopped and went off and researched something else, and it was wrong. And so I came back and said, you're wrong. And only then did we have the fess up conversation.
Yeah, and you got to think critically. It's about critical thinking when utilizing these tools in a row. So then the third paper, which brings it together as well, is the cognitive impact of ChatGPT in higher education, a systematic review of critical and creative thinking outcomes.
Yeah, so this is a meta paper. So basically what they did, meta as in lowercase meta, not as in the company. So what they did was they looked at 67 research studies over the last 3 years about the impact of ChatGPT on learning and trying to understand, is it helping or harming? And the biggest finding that they found after they'd finished looking at all 67 papers is ChatGPT isn't the deciding factor. It's not ChatGPT that is helping or harming learning. It actually depends on the context that the students are using it in. And so you can use ChatGPT to help you with your reasoning, your argument building, your creativity. You can get it to help you compare ideas. You can get it to help you revise work. But you've got to use it in a structured way to do that. You've got to not just offload the whole task. You remember, we've talked about cognitive offloading at least 3 or 4 times this year. Like, don't let the AI do all of the thinking for you. And that's maybe different to some of the contexts in business. Although I actually think now, as adults, we need to be super aware of this as well.
Yeah. And when you're designing activities and things, if you're a teacher or whatever you're doing with this, I suppose it's about thinking about the activities you're doing and the opportunities for it to generate creative thought, to give you ideas, then you can develop those more. Some of this doesn't sound like rocket science, but it's good that the research papers are picking this up because that's exactly what you do.
And Dan, it goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about you're using AI as a coach in your training where it gives you scenarios that you have to work through.
Yes,
It's
correct.
not a shortcut to getting the answer. It is there as a learning buddy.
Yeah, discussion, reflection, critical friend, challenging. What could I think about this in a different way? All of those kind of things. Yeah.
Okay, 2
Love it.
last papers. I know we're running over, but let's do them anyway because I think
Yes.
these are 2 important ones to cover now. So the next paper is called AI-induced never skilling in medical education. I love this phrase, never skilling. So it's basically recognizes that there are some students that are waltzing through education, never learning anything because AI will do it for them, and therefore they are never skilling. There was a great quote in here. A co-pilot is only useful if trainees first learn how to be pilots. Yeah?
Say that again. So
A co-pilot,
I'm in a world of like negative like things here. Never skilling and co-pilot the tip.
a co-pilot is only useful if
Yes.
trainees first learn how to be pilots.
Yeah.
Because
True. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't afford to offload all of your thinking and then use AI because then if AI started to make mistakes, if AI isn't helping you,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to spot it. And in the world of learning especially, we're now starting to make learning too easy when it's supposed to be hard.
Yes, got you. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
and
I love that analogy actually. So it's a very good point because one way you could talk about that is there's somebody to support you on the side, but you have got somebody who's the pilot who's done the actual qualifications, right?
yeah, and if you're thinking about, how do you develop clinical reasoning? Well, you develop it and you make it stick by going through a number of scenarios, not just knowing the answer. That
Yeah.
awful moment I've seen on enough TV programs where the junior doctors come around with the senior surgeon and the senior surgeon points at the patient and goes, what do you think is wrong with this person? That process is
Yeah.
supposed to be hard.
Yeah. But even when I keep rereading this, it keeps distracting me. The title because it's medical. It's like what AI induced, never skilling in. Like the entire title's burning my brain. I keep thinking of AI induction and childbirth. So I need to move on. What's the next one?
Okay, Dan, would you believe there's been a paper about AI detectors?
Really? Is that? Oh, fantastic! We haven't had one of them for a while.
Okay, the paper's called Who Wrote This? Evaluating the Reliability of AI Detection Tools in Higher Education. So what they did was they tested Pangram, Turnitin, GPT-0, and CopyLeaks. They looked at 160 papers and they knew exactly how those papers were written. So some were human written, some were AI written, some were hybrid, and some were humanized AI. So they wrote it in AI and then they got AI to humanize it so it should pass through a detector. There are two big findings in this. The first is they miss papers. In some cases, they miss the majority of AI written papers.
Right.
So, as they put it, frequently fail to detect fully AI generated papers. Interestingly, GPT-0 and CopyLeaks were worse when it comes to wholly AI written. So if you've written half of it and got AI to write the other half, it's more likely to say it's AI written than if you gave it a whole AI.
Interesting. Right.
paper.
Yeah.
Okay, so channeling the Love Actually pop star. So kids, if you're going to cheat, go all in on cheating.
Yeah.
But the other thing is false positives. So false positive is you've written this essay yourself and AI says you cheated. They say false positives were very rare. So why do we think there's a lot of false positives? It's because of a research paper in 2022 and things have moved on a bit. So I think this is really quite good news, but they still did pop up. So depending on which you were using, you could get false positives. The argument they use is, think of AI detectors like a smoke alarm. It's something that tells you something might be wrong, but it doesn't prove there's a fire. Let me ask you, Dan, how many times have you heard a smoke alarm go off?
A lot of times.
And how often has it been a real fire?
No, usually my cooking. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Burnt toast. Those hotels where they say close the bathroom door before you. Yeah. So an AI detector is a smoke alarm, not a device that tells you that somebody has cheated.
That's a good analogy.
Consistent with everything we've been saying. So there we go, Dan. Half a dozen AI and education research papers that I think are really important. We'll put the links in the show notes. Go and read the ones you're interested in for yourself. We have not covered them in depth. We're just telling you what's out there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ray. Thanks for doing that.